My name is Claire Angel, and I'm the founder and CEO of Angel Consulting. We're an Atlanta-based, purpose-driven PR company, and it's my absolute pleasure to be your moderator today. I'm joined by people who have dedicated their career to serving others and uplifting their communities, and it's a privilege to be here. So to my immediate left, we have Lorraine Cochran-Johnson, CEO-elect of DeKalb County. Many fans in the room. Followed by Mayor Woodfin, Mayor of Birmingham, 34th Mayor of Birmingham, Alabama. And Mayor Reed, Mayor of Montgomery, Alabama. Thank you for being here today. So today in America, 80% of the population lives in an urban area. And so cities are microcosm of opportunities and challenges. So when we look at the challenges the world is facing, ranging from climate change to income inequality and everything in between, if we were to tackle those issues at the city level, imagine the impact we could have. Yet, I believe that when it comes to federal funding, only 10% of funding trickle down to the city level. So that poses this paradigm of impact versus resources. And so I would like to ask the question, and CEO Cochran-Johnson, maybe with you first, but please feel free to chime in about when you look at the vast area of responsibilities that at the county or city level you have to tackle. First, what is the responsibility of cities? I think that there might be, at least for me, a lack of education of understanding the portfolio that is you're responsible for. And then how do you go about prioritizing the sheer volume of requests that the well-being of your residents depend on?
Let me say that as a former commissioner, 5 years, 3 months, and 10 days, but I did not count, the number one responsibility of elected officials is good government. Let me also say that understanding that people look to us for what they cannot do for themselves, we have to expand beyond government. So wraparound services become extremely important in the delivery of services that are important to people. Technically in government, we're responsible for your essential services. But I will say, coming from corporate America into government, I truly don't believe that most individuals within government have bought the notion that we're really in the business of the delivery of essential services. I give you what you can't give yourself: water, infrastructure, sewer. You don't have an option. So when I look at government and what our responsibility is, first and foremost, it's to provide public safety. Everyone wants to live in a safe environment. We are responsible for economic development. And increasingly, as elected officials, we must do more with less. So we have to be industrious as well in the delivery of services, and that's something that I welcome the opportunity to talk about, because I truly believe that we need a paradigm shift, and it's time in government that we tend to think differently, in the words of Steve Jobs, on how we go about creating income. Because when you talk about what trickles down from the federal level, we can't sit here, so I've had to be industrious. In DeKalb County, I used our audit department, instituted mandatory audit of contracts over $3 million, and saved taxpayers $92 million. So we have to be also fiscally responsible and also have the ability to create income.
Mayor Woodfin, I think that's an interesting segue to what you've done also in Birmingham in terms of the audit and pension reform system. Could you maybe touch upon that and elaborate on the answer?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Honored to be here at the Global Forums. Major shout out to John Hope Bryan for what he does and who he is. Thanks for allowing me to be on this stage, and congratulations to you, Madam CEO-elect. And as always, glad to be here with my partner down the street, Mayor of Montgomery, Mayor Reed. With that said, I really love the title of this, Straight Talks, because I feel like you're giving me permission just to speak really, really plainly to what's happening in metropolises across our nation in today's time. It's not really a lot to add to what Madam CEO said, because she's spot on as it relates to what it is cities are responsible for. But when you peel back all the layers, and if you wanted to simplify and look under the hood of what municipal governments are responsible for, it's really two things with your tax dollars: public safety, public infrastructure. Public safety, public infrastructure. Now, those two things are very complex and they're very layered. As she said, from policing to fire to emergency management to sidewalks and street lights and paving and et cetera, stormwater. I mean, there's so many layers to those two things. When you go deeper, what you want from both of those things and what you want from your mayors and your county commissioners or any form of government, whether it's local, state, or at the federal level, is some core values we have, which is to be efficient and effective with those tax dollars, because it's your money. And so with that, what we did was, let's audit ourselves. Let's look at, one, what we inherited, which is what this young lady is about to do. She's inheriting some things she may like, and she's going to inherit some things she really doesn't like, y'all. Really, really don't like. But audits put you in the position, one, to be armed with factual information, so not just how you feel about a certain situation, but once you get those results of that audit, to being able to do things not just based on tangible recommendations to say, we're going to change this, this is why, this is the direction we're going, and because of this, it will be more efficient and more effective of how we not only deliver services, but maximizing the limited tax dollars we have that we bring in.
Thank you. Marion, can you touch upon in Montgomery about what was day one in office, inherited a portfolio and a status of the city of how you tackle that prioritization landscape?
Yeah, in my case, a little bit different. I'm the first black mayor of the city of Montgomery in its 200-year history. Thank you. So, day one was just a total reset city government based on how it had been run. I like to say that the city government had really been run by a few families and a few entities for many decades. And their modus operandi was to keep it small, keep it all. And that's really, how they went about doing things. So a lot of the things that we were seeing some of our sister and brother cities around the South do for years and years, we had not done. So, I had the privilege of, matriculating through Morehouse College, like my brother here, Randall Woodfin. So we were here understanding the legacy of Maynard Jackson. And when you come through Atlanta, whether you're anywhere, any of the great colleges and universities that are here, it's different because the vibe here is different. The energy here is different. So you can't help but be exposed to that and impacted by that. So we came in with the mindset of how to make government work for truly people who felt like government had looked over them, never listened to them, and had looked beyond them and left them behind. And so our approach was to really look at best practices from, major, mid-sized, and small cities to see how we could start making sure that government was working for everyone, regardless of their zip code. And that's really what we've tried to do. And I agree with my colleagues here in leadership is that you've got basic functions that you're responsible for as a CEO of a large county like DeKalb or a large city like Birmingham. But there are also other things that I think we tend to want to do, just be straight with you as black leaders, because we come from a different tradition. We come from a different culture. And as the president of the African American Mayors Association, right now, if you have a black mayor, more than likely, they are a member of that association. Well over 400 or so mayors are members of that, and we talk and text and everything else about what's happening, whether it's in Seattle or whether it's in Savannah, whether it's in LA or whether it's in New York or Maryland or anywhere in between, or whether it's in Little Rock, Arkansas. These are things that we're trying to figure out. How do we make sure that despite maybe some obstacles at the state level, which a lot of us have, most of us have now, even throughout the Midwest, because of who's running legislatures, who's running your governor's mansions and others, how we navigate around that. And from our perspective, we know that, again, because of our tradition and the faith in which we walk, that we have to do things over and beyond what the statute may call for in that position or what the Constitution may call for. And sometimes that makes us targets. And that's when we need the help of people like John Hope Bryant. That's when we need the help of many of you in your corporate and philanthropic and professional responsibilities to assist us with ways to really get in places that government can't. And when you're representing mostly minority communities, both black and brown, it becomes a challenge. And I think on top of what the leaders here have said is that we tend to go a little bit beyond just what's right in front of us, because we understand when you go to revival, what that deacon is saying after revival is over, or when you go in the barbershop, what's being talked about, whether you're there or not. And the same thing just culturally and socially. And that, I think, informs our opinions and our management styles about how we prioritize, to get to your question, about these things that functionally we're responsible for, but also we know, just because of who we are and our connectivity, those things that people really need us for. And there can be a difference between what's written in black and white on paper and what you know your community needs when you're that close to it.
Thank you, Mary. You mentioned two aspects that I found really compelling. One is the spirit of collaboration that you found with mayors in general, with organizations like the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and even at the global level. And also the importance of civic society and the corporate world in kind of a new era of public-private partnership. My perspective is that we're moving away from the traditional model of an infrastructure-based, somewhat short-term oriented way of cities partnering with the private sectors to long-term, people-centric and holistic approach to community building. Could you maybe touch upon, in your respective communities and cities, about how concretely you work with different stakeholders, and also answering the question of, we talked about taxpayer monies and the responsibility that comes with that. Is the governance mandate to innovate on its own? And if not, how do you, again, partner with those different actors to bring the best to your constituencies with minimizing the risk?
I guess any of us? Oh, how about this? I'll jump in. I tend to think that with limited tax dollars, the things you want to do on behalf of the citizens you represent, you can't do them with just your pot of money, because it's not enough. And so in order for municipal governments, county governments to be successful, the way it works is you have to leverage, you have to build, you have to have a rapport, you have to be intentional about genuine public-private partnerships. I think for us it's layered. We start with the end in mind. I define the end in mind as being extremely people-centric. When you're people-centric, you put people first. And the first cohort or group of people you want to put first is your youngest and next generation. For us, that's our high school students who finish high school. What do you want for them next? So we created a program called Birmingham Promise. There are probably other cities in this community, in this audience, you have a Promise program. But for us, it's pretty simple. Our high school graduates can now attend any state school, 2- or 4-year college, university, tuition free, no questions asked about their GPA. No questions about their ACT or SAT score. The city of Birmingham has committed $10 million to this program, and then it is a partnership with our private sector. It has been in existence for 5 years. We just celebrated 5 years, November 15th. And then this year in 2024, we just got our first national donor, PNC Banks Foundation, of $10 million. That is an example of a public-private partnership. But you can also have public-public partnerships. As the Biden-Harris administration closes out, I'm proud to say over the last 3+ years, the city of Birmingham has gotten about $100 million in competitive grants. All right, competitive grants, right? Key emphasis on the word competitive, meaning with our compelling vision, with our story and what we wanted to do for our citizens and improving their quality of life, we went after these competitive federal grants. We got a $50 million choice grant to revitalize 3 neighborhoods within our city, a city made up of 99 neighborhoods. On top of that, we got a recompete grant. We also got we got many other grants that were intentional about workforce development, but layered, not just workforce development, but what are the barriers that keep our citizens from working? Is it childcare? Is it transportation? And so these grants have allowed us to not only peel back those layers and address those issues, but put resources back in community that focuses on giving people not only quality of life, but in a tangible way: job, childcare, public transportation, housing, et cetera. Last thing I would say is when you have that public-public partnership, you're in a position to leverage federal dollars. With our ARPA dollars, we talk about housing. We all know in our communities, whether it's Atlanta here or across the nation, even in DeKalb, there's not only a shortage, but cost is prohibitive for a lot of citizens. Well, we created a housing trust fund, which included a down payment assistance program starting at least $10,000 for citizens in our city. But that's coupled with education to make sure they not can only just afford to get the home, but make sure they can stay in it and raise their family in that same home.
And I will say that in DeKalb County, yes, and I'm so excited. Let me say that we're all from Alabama. I'm from LA. I'm from Lower Alabama. I'm from Greenville. So to sit here with 2 men, Montgomery and Birmingham, both mayors, and myself here in Atlanta, I am so excited and proud of you, gentlemen. Let me say that here in DeKalb County, my partnerships have been birthed around a concept that I refer to as corporate consciousness. And I'd say that probably about a decade ago, people began to realize that we were better working together, and that the true measure of society is not how we move as individuals, but how we progress collectively. And as a result of that, Fortune 500 companies and others began to make investments to feel good. And to be honest, I want to be very clear, with all the movement that I see on the federal level, I wonder where we're headed now. Because we didn't all start at the same place, and a hand up is not a hand out. So in forming relationships, I guess the best example that I can use is Operation Hope. Got to know John Hope Bryant after he moved here. At the time, I was managing the Atlanta Daily World newspaper. First person I ever knew to have an event at the Federal Reserve Bank, so I thought, well, I'm going to go down there. This is interesting. Well, after getting to know him and understanding what he did, as soon as I got into DeKalb County, because I have huge diversity. Some people don't realize that Brookhaven, as well as Dunwoody, is DeKalb County. Because if you go to South DeKalb, the Mason-Dixon line is Memorial Drive, things change. Imagine that. So I am a huge advocate for self-help, entrepreneurship. I come from a long line of Southern Baptist ministers and entrepreneurs. Grandfather, commercial farmer, produced everything from sugar cane to market to me running through cotton fields as a kid. And I reached out to him because I said, you know, John, I know that your model is to operate out of financial institutions, but what I'm finding is in many instances, black and brown people aren't walking in because they already think they understand what's going to happen when they walk out. So I'd like to redirect your model. I would like to bring hope to DeKalb. We need financial dignity training, and I need home ownership programs. Because in certain parts of DeKalb, let me be clear to everyone in here, 80% of the majority of African American wealth is directly linked to home ownership. If you own no home, you have no wealth in some communities. So as a result, we were able to, I believe PNC underwrites a program for us, and we provide 100% down payment assistance up to $250,000, and we've issued over $22 million in home loans and down payment assistance. So we're creating home owners. And when we talk about, the corporate consciousness and thinking outside the box, again, it takes partners for us to create ideal outcomes, because government isn't in the business of housing, I'm sorry to tell you. That's not what we do. So we need housing partners, whether it's for affordable housing, workplace housing, and even creating homeowners. So that's one of the easy examples that I can give of how we go about extending ourselves and forming relationships that help us achieve goals.
Thank you, Madame CEO. I'm going to borrow the expression, can practice my French. Mary, can you tell us a bit about how in your community you're approaching public-private partnership?
Well, in our city, I've always felt, coming from the private sector, in business, both in corporate America as well as running my own business, that was a necessity. Again, being here and being in other larger cities, I was able to see the impact of those corporations and those small business owners and mid-sized business owners, what they could do in their community. Unfortunately, in a city like Montgomery, we haven't had as strong of an entrepreneurial base as a city like Birmingham, Atlanta, Decatur, and places like that. So I came in with the mindset understanding what the opportunities might be, but also where the limitations of government might be. And I didn't feel like I would get the assistance in our state legislature, which I haven't. I didn't feel like I get the assistance from our governor, which I haven't. And I didn't feel like I would get the sense at higher levels of there. So I knew that we were going to have to reach out. So one of those partners, again, for us was Operation Hope, and coming in to really serve those that have been underbanked in our community. And I reached out, John O'Brien, seeing him on CNBC, going through, he was on the roll that day. And I was like, but he's speaking my language, because I just feel that it's so important for us not just to rest as leaders on where we are, and not to make sure we are bringing our folks with us. And too often people get in leadership roles and they become managers. And maybe that's who they always were, and they just wound up in a leadership position. But I tell people all the time, just because you're elected doesn't mean you know it all. So understand what it is you know and what it is you don't know. And so for us, the thought was, how do we build relationships with those in the private sector who have benefited from what happened in Montgomery, Alabama? Just last week, we celebrated the 69th anniversary of the Montgomery bus boycott, where a son of Atlanta was elected president of this organization at the age of 26, although he had only been in the city about 9 months. And he was coming to make sure the church didn't get in any more trouble. This is an important fact of where I'm going. And so when this man named Martin Luther King Jr. comes to Dexter Avenue, he's coming because the previous person had been run out by the mayor at that time and the city leadership, the city commissioners, because he was leading too many protests for equality for black people. That pastor's name was Vernon Johns. If you don't know who he is, I encourage you to look him up and read his story. So those in Montgomery thought that Dr. King would be the best spokesperson for it, although they had been leading the movement. It's a story of unselfishness. It's a story of really team outcomes. And so he was nominated, which was supposed to be a very short bus boycott, and the rest becomes history. That leads the modern civil rights movement. But it came with people leading a strategic and very tactical protest for 381 days, without technology, without everyone having a phone, without everyone having a car. And they were able to do that which led to so many of the other gains that we got because of philanthropic and private support. That part is often left out. They didn't just do it just with sheer will. It started there and ended there, but there was a lot of support with that. So we have a number of companies and corporate leaders and directors and entrepreneurs that come visit Montgomery every day. Most will come through Atlanta and learn about what happened here and the leadership, obviously, that existed here, and they come to Montgomery as well. But out of all of that, what I talk to the corporations and the billion-dollar philanthropic arms that come there is what are they doing in places that are hard to reach? What are they doing in mid-sized and small cities in the South and in the Midwest that's not a corporate capital? So for us, it is important to both reach out to them but also challenge them. And so we've seen Bloomberg Philanthropies, we've seen the Ford Foundation, we've seen so many others who have not been asked nor challenged to come aboard that have come aboard. McKinsey Scott also is one. We've seen so many major philanthropies because of the history of the city that have come to partner with us, in part because we asked, in part because in some cases we challenged, and in part because they felt the need to do something beyond just where they were headquartered or maybe anchored. So that has been very, very important for us. And I serve on a P3 committee where Andre Dickens is the chair of that committee. And what better place in Atlanta with so much of the corporate support that this city has gotten over the past several decades. He understands that, and so he's also been a great model for a lot of us as mayors to really point out where there may be some small wins. A lot of us get focused on the big wins, but where they may be. And so when you have a Birmingham Promise like they do in Mayor Woodfin's city, and you have some of these other initiatives around entrepreneurship, it's important for us to support those, and it's important for us to highlight and uplift those, because somewhere along the line, there's an area for each and every person in this room and each and every person who's watching virtually to play in their own respective community. Because government will only be able to impact so many and but so much. So the public-private partnerships and the public-public partnerships, as Mayor Woodfin brought up, are essential to the progress of our communities and our cities, because that's what it takes in what is really not an opportunity economy, and what is really an economy that seems to be rewarding those at the very, very top and leaving those from the middle down out. And so it takes a lot of partnership and collaboration to do that. And whatever the city's story is, it may not be the same as Montgomery's, it may not be the same as Atlanta's. The city has a story, the community has a story, and you have to make sure that those stakeholders are engaged enough to come off the sideline and feel comfortable and trustworthy enough to work with that leadership in order to provide the outcomes that our residents are looking for.
I just want to add to what he's saying, because the P3 that your mayor here in Atlanta, Andre Dickens, is leading is extremely important. The conversation we're having among mayors, particularly in the Southeast, this audience should know the same thing I tell any national audience I speak in front of in 2024. Most national philanthropic dollars are on the East and West Coast. There is literally less than 10%, maybe less than 5% that's in the Southeast. And so we got to find ways to continue, whether it's the CAB of Montgomery, to share our compelling visions of our communities, our whys, and why those partnerships as well as those resources are needed in the Southeast. When you talk about disadvantaged communities, when you talk about minorities, and I'm unapologetic about it, when you talk about black communities, they're here in the South. They're mostly concentrated in the South. And the impact and the things we need to see as it relates to big enough, our communities, all three of our communities are big enough to try something, but also, small enough to try something, but big enough to scale if it's successful. Having those public-private partnerships and leveraging those resources that come to the South, there's a story to tell.
Absolutely. Well, I speak of the power of storytelling, and we mentioned the statistic of 80% of people living in cities, but also 80% of the US population lives east of the Mississippi River. So as we see the concentration of foundation on the West Coast, but the human concentration on the East Coast, being able to attract those opportunities and those investments. I think there's also a realization on the corporate side that it's just not a handout. There is a return on investments for those organizations tenfold. We briefly talked about affordable housing, but I would like to go back specifically on that topic because so many Americans, and we see it in the news, struggle with access to ownership, being able to live in the communities they serve. I'm talking first responders, law enforcement, where salaries make it increasingly difficult to live in the city they serve. And then if we push it to homelessness, I was reading the latest stats, 12% increase in homelessness across the country. What are your respective communities, especially dealing around the topics of affordable housing on one end and homelessness on the other end?
Well, let me start by saying to everyone here, because it's just a lingering thought, that the future of America is not based in legislation, but in economics. What we see across America is an increasing wealth equity divide. Consequently, we are seeing an increase in the rise of homelessness. Let me be clear that a little over a year ago, I employed Ernst & Young to conduct a study because in DeKalb County, 780,000 residents. At the peak of COVID, we had 60,000 individuals on a waiting list for affordable housing. We can't possibly meet the need of the people. And when that study came back, probably the most alarming thing that I saw, that in America, it is a scarlet letter to be poor. You would need to work 140 hours a week on minimum wage to afford a 2-bedroom, 2-bath unit in Metro Atlanta apartment. That is not realistic, nor is it sustainable. And I've seen us in government pour tons of money on public safety, but we never talk about the number one underlying factor of crime is economics and a lack of access. So when we talk about housing, and that's why for me Operation Hope has been so important, because it's time we move away in many instances now from the civil rights conversation to the silver rights conversation. How do we distribute wealth in America? How do we provide for the least of those with those who contain the majority of wealth in America, understanding that you're better when they are? That is the true conversation that is necessary. You know, I can sit here and talk about a lot of gaps in America. And when we talk about housing, housing is a human right. When I look at the money on the federal level that we are pouring into programs outside the United States as we decay, we ought to be ashamed of ourselves. We have third world countries who can provide universal health care. But in our infinite wisdom, as Democrats and Republicans fight amongst each other, we cannot provide for our own people. So, when we talk about housing, the education is important. I have made a lot of first-generation homeowners in DeKalb County, and I'm proud of that. Because financial literacy is important, working with organizations who can bring the education, and keeping in mind that it is ongoing. Encouraging entrepreneurship is really important. So also increasing the diversity of housing. I can sit here and talk to you about changing zoning, because in DeKalb County, in certain areas, we have the belief that only R100, residential housing, is what everyone wants, when we see a shift in that in America. So we have to have the ability also to articulate to people the importance of that diversity of housing, and ensuring also, because in certain parts of DeKalb, we are dealing with gentrification. and let's be clear, gentrification ain't a bad thing. All day I educate people. Because when it comes to gentrification in certain areas, it's really simple economic development is. I can call anyone, Whole Foods, and I can say 5370 Sandy Lake East. They will only concern themselves with two things to determine if they'll locate in my community. That is the amount of rooftops within a quarter-mile radius and the median household income. Across most of our communities, we're disjointed. Where there's the income, we don't have the rooftops. Where we have the rooftops, we don't have the income. So that's where leaders like us become important, because we've got to balance to give you what you want, but you also have to educate the constituency that you can't say no to everything. This is not a zero-sum game. To get what you want, you have to give something. So how we choose to grow our cities is very important, and our communities. So those are the things that I sit and spend great hours of time figuring out, and how to present them to people so that they understand the importance of diversity of housing, zoning, as well as economic development, and the equity factor from corporate entities who could do more.
I don't want to go after you. Bad. Sister Bad, bro.
I'm just a working woman.
Fire around here. That's tough to follow up for real. So passionate, y'all. I love it, the commitment. Your folks are in for a treat. Your leadership is needed. Here's what I'll say. Again, if you were listening earlier, I said I think it's extremely important, even in a topic that is hard as affordable housing is, to start with the end in mind. Again, what does that mean, the next and youngest generation? It's not enough to just teach them math, science, reading, social studies, English, etc. It's not enough just to teach them the co-curriculum and the extracurriculum. You have to teach the things that I wasn't taught in school, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, I wasn't taught at home either, and that's financial literacy. So we have partnered with some private organizations in our community, and through this public-private partnership, the city has committed a minimum of $1 million a year to make sure our children at all grade levels, 9th through 12th high school, 6th through 8th middle school, and elementary kids, are literally learning financial literacy now. So at whatever point they choose to want to become a homeowner or a renter or whatever that is, they're armed with enough information to know what that means, what credit means, what saving means, what investing means, etc. You can't leave that out. I know we're focused on the immediate issue of the housing crisis and affordable, etc. But you also have to think long term, that future generation who you want to live in your city. One of the best ways to put them in a position to be homeowners or whatever form of style of living they want, give them the financial literacy they deserve and need. That's one. Here's two. Everything can't be single family housing, y'all. It's, after the 2008 housing crisis, here's what I saw. All the risk went to multifamily, but non-home ownership. It's all rental. So somebody's getting paid a lot of money, and then a lot of people out here broke and struggling. It's more people broke and struggling than a lot of people making a lot of money. With that said, there's a housing piece in the middle that we don't discuss enough. Duplexes, triplexes, and other forms of micro-housing, etc., that supports a new generation of how space is, what they want to live, what their community looks like. As well as infill housing for a community like Birmingham, whose population went from 340,000 in the 70s to right at 200,000 now. So we're having this conversation about how does affordable housing and infill housing intersect, and how can we support those for those communities without making sure the residents who are to live there, particularly our seniors, can still afford to stay there as well as pay their taxes. But then there's a third piece, and I spoke to it earlier. Cities, we were all exposed during the coronavirus, and we all received money at the county level, cities level, rental assistance. Well, all that money, it washed up, right? But the residents were still in need. And so then shifting to how to get creative with those ARPA dollars and create a down payment assistance program for first responders, for nurses, for teachers, etc., taking care of your employees who are on the front lines, but still are hurting as much as everybody else, you have to be very intentional about that. So again, for us, last week, I talked to a 20-year-old via FaceTime who was literally in a private office, signing his papers, getting his keys to be a first-time homeowner. And he was able to do that because of us assisting him with that $10,000 for his down payment. But that wasn't enough. It wasn't just to get his keys. Did we put the necessary things in place over the last year to make sure he can remain a homeowner? When you hit a wall, if a pipe bursts in your home, insurance, et cetera, et cetera. So continuing to educate him on the long term. I think this conversation in affordable housing, I'll just end it by saying this. It can't just be city governments alone. We partner with NCRC. If you haven't heard of NCRC, I encourage you to learn more about NCRC. What we've done is say, as a city government, no, we're not responsible for housing, but we've partnered with a lot of developers, including NCRC, who's partnered with developers to say, we're going to put more public dollars in this affordable housing conversation to make sure we can get more rooftops in our city limits, but to also make sure residents who want to live within our city limits can afford to live there.
Thank you. I got the 5-minute warning, so I want to start with you, Mary, for that final question, because I want to leave the audience with an uplifting vision for the future. So let's put aside term limit and the logistic of things, but can you draw a vision in 10 years from now from your respective cities and counties of what success look like for your residents?
Yeah, that's easy. I think for me, we want to have a city where everyone feels like they have an opportunity to live, learn, and earn. And for us, that means, again, making sure that the things we do as a government benefit the whole and not just the few. And we have to be courageous, and we have to take unpopular stances. And we have to make sure that whether it's public education or public health initiatives, that we're doing things to really overcorrect of the sins of the past. And from our standpoint, that means growing our economy. That means growing our middle class. That means growing our small and mid-sized businesses, and making sure that as much as people have one impression of maybe certain cities, that the reality is different. And in our case, we're not just a government city as the state capital of Alabama, but we're one that is really looking to be innovative in the knowledge-based economy, and that's really looking to innovate how the best of the entrepreneurs and small business owners can succeed right in our city. So we do that through housing initiatives, we do that through financial literacy initiatives and many other things that we've talked about, but we have to continue to do that with the partnership of so many in this room and, again, others that are watching virtually, to make sure that we're getting it right. I don't have all the answers. Our city council doesn't have all the answers. No one at any level of government has all the answers. Our democracy is only as strong as the people who participate in it. So you have to participate in that democracy in order for it to be strong. So all the people, whether they're elected or not, have something to give. And as our leaders were saying here, there's so many great ideas and so many things that we're looking to do that I believe if you just take a small piece of that with those that are in this room and those that are in this conference, then our communities will reach some form of the vision that I think many of us have for the next 10 years.
Thank you.
So I'll start with 10 years ago to get to 10 years from now. A grandmother stands on her porch. She looks to her right. She sees a dilapidated house, burned out structure here. On her left is an empty, overgrown lot. In front of her, sidewalk is buckling. She pulls out of her driveway. She's dodging potholes. She walks her grandchild down to the neighborhood park. She gets there, doesn't necessarily have the playground equipment that work. It's time to come home early because the street light doesn't work. She gets home. She's reminded that she doesn't live in proximity of healthy food options. And the unfortunate part, from time to time, she has to drop on the floor out of bed because she hears gunshots at night. I think 10 years from now, I think today, and everything in between those 10 years, is that when she walks on her porch, she looks to her right, we removed this blighted structure. To her left, we not only cut that lot, but we built a home here and a home here. We made that sidewalk walkable and bikeable. We made that streets all drivable. We made all of our parks equitable, and all the playground equipment works. And we continue to partner with Alabama Power to get more LED lights in neighborhoods. And we got healthy, adequate food options in all of our neighborhoods in walking and driving distance, as well as we finally found a solution to gun violence. But it's more than that, because I talked about that child or that grandchild. He or she will finish high school. They will choose whether they want to stay in Birmingham or go somewhere else for an opportunity. But home is where they'll always have an opportunity. They don't necessarily have to leave for whatever their dream or their hopes is for that to materialize, that exists right at home. As well as for any little black girl, because I now have a 4-month-old daughter. Whatever her dream is, whatever her passion is, wherever she lives in this country, laying in bed at night, that we can make her dream of becoming an entrepreneur or whatever it is tangible, and she can move to Birmingham, because the city is going to take the risk for her to be successful, and we're going to support her dreams.
Thank you.
And understanding that we are completely out of time, because I see the cue card, I will simply say that, 10 years, that's a decade. For me, that's a long time. I didn't come to DeKalb, honestly, with any expectation of becoming the CEO, and I don't think they expected me to either. What I will say, that in 4 years, I will produce a more equitable DeKalb, because I'm based in fact and science. Many of the issues that we face aren't difficult. People are difficult. Politics are difficult. When one seeks to move the needle, all you have to do is assess. And sometimes that requires you to assess those around you, so that you put the right people in place to achieve whatever those desired outcomes are. And I sit here with the knowledge, after managing corporations, that you cannot expect what you do not inspect. So across DeKalb, there will be a lot of inspection. We will operate with clarity of purpose. Everyone will understand their job roles and responsibilities and be required to ensure that they produce. And at the end of that 4-year period, because for elected officials, that's how we deal, then I will assess. Because I came from corporate America, and let me say to you that I understand the importance of doing good. And I don't have to be the drum major of a parade to do that. I could do it from a number of different perspectives. So producing, creating a better quality of life, and also a framework where all people have the opportunity to grow and thrive.
Thank you very much. Thank you, all our panelists, for your time today.